Welcome to Talk Purpose and Truth with Eden and Kim, shifting you into higher consciousness, the show that elevates, uplifts, and encourages listeners to grow, heal, awaken, and evolve. Eden and Kim include bold topics, special interviews with inspiring guests, intuitive readings, channeled messages from beyond, including celebrities, hot topics to expand your awareness, and time for questions from the audience. Tune in for unprecedented truth, authenticity, on-purpose discussions, and magical moments.
Desiring and asking for something more, but don't know what would be the most rewarding and fulfilling choice to make. And I want to repeat that for our audience, because I really think at the beginning of the year, and I've been getting this a lot with my readings, people are at this place right now, just with the pandemic or with whatever shifting in the world. So the question on her website is, are you desiring and asking for something more, but don't know what would be the most rewarding and fulfilling choice to make? And this makes me think of a time, I read that when I was researching about her, and it made me think of a time when I was actually teaching special education. I had worked starting back in like 1998, I had worked with adults with disabilities and severe behavior problems. And then I went into working in special education for quite a long time, kids in wheelchairs, you name it. And the hours were crazy, and I liked it, and I felt like it was fulfilling, but I just kept feeling this nudge, this like emptiness, like you are not fulfilling your purpose. You're not following your path. And I was like, okay, well, what would be more rewarding and fulfilling? What am I supposed to be doing? I don't get it. And so really what would help me is just to keep asking, put me where I'm supposed to be, God, divine source, put me where I'm supposed to be. And so I ended up feeling very pulled to Glaica's teachings, which she was on our show a while back. And I went to her week-long course with my husband, not knowing that it would be life-changing for me, and ended up realizing in that course that I needed to quit everything I was doing and step into becoming a coach, and then step forth more with all the other stuff I was doing. And so that's what that question made me realize, okay, that's what happened with me. And so I think that a lot of people are there. Eden, what about you? Are you there now, or do you remember a time in the past when you felt like that?
Oh, yeah. There was a time, I think the kids were little, and I just had just kind of a regular job. I wasn't doing anything that I was passionate about doing. But at the same time, I didn't feel like I was passionate about anything. So it was just kind of a limbo place. And shortly after that, I felt like a dullness or I guess just limbo place where I was just there but not really progressing. Is when I got this phone call from my sister asking me to do something that I've never done before. To use the skills that I knew that I had as a medium to help one of her friends, and that turned into what I'm doing now for the last 10 years, working with clients and helping them, heal from losing their loved ones. Which feels so purposeful, so powerful and gratifying. It feels like a calling. And I think I laughed and I resisted when I got that call. I didn't want to do it. But something in me kept telling me, no, I have to listen to this. I have to follow. And thank goodness I did, because this is where I'm at now and I'm happy with it. But yes, I think there's so many people. And I have a client I met with today who it came through in the reading that she needs to work with babies. And she's like, oh my gosh, well, I guess there's my answer, because she's in a nursing school and she keeps telling herself she doesn't want to have to deal with delivering babies because some of them die. And she would rather go and do something else in the medical field that's not as fun or fulfilling for her, or it's not her passion. Her passion is working with the babies and delivering babies, but she didn't want to do that. She wanted to deny it because she felt like it would be sad. So, but it just like immediately came through, and they told her that because that's what her soul wants to do.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of times we don't listen to that, or we don't ask, what is our purpose?
Yeah. So, Glacia, how do you help your clients with this?
I just listen to their higher selves.
Yeah.
It's really easy for me. And typically they say, yep, I've been getting that message. So, their higher self has been nudging them. And then they'll come to me to be like, well, I'm not sure. And then I just listen to their higher self, say whatever comes through, if it makes sense to me or not. And then people typically are in alignment with it already. They've heard it, and sometimes it's hard where they had never thought of that, but it resonates with them still.
I got confirmation. Right. And when you say that, it's because you have those intuitive gifts that you can tune into that.
Yeah. My higher self all the time as it's just an inner voice now. And everybody has this ability. So your higher self exists within the different layers of your aura, which extend way out into the universe. But yeah,
it's whether someone I get a lot of light workers that I do readings for, but they get scared to step into that next level, and I think they get scared of knowing bad things or being wrong, or there's so many different things. And so I think that more and more people right now are being called to things like that, to those levels, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of people are being called into healing and things like that. A lot of people are feeling this transition that you were just talking about, how they're not who they used to be. They're not who they want to be yet. And they're just in that transition period looking for guidance, or waiting for that call, or waiting for things to show up in front of them.
And there's a difference there too, because my experience, without even being conscious of what I was doing, I was waiting for the opportunity to come to me rather than force it. And a lot of people are impatient with that because they're out for the money. They have this attachment to making money. So it's so much harder. I think it makes it a harder with path with more obstacles when you come from that place.
Yeah. It's I have a client that she researched which career would make the most money, even though she had a dream to do something else, went and got the degree in that thing, ended up she's still working in that field and is in a deep depression. And so because she never ever followed the things she really wanted to do.
Yeah, forcing your path is the slowest way.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Forcing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how do we know? Well, I mean, I know now from learning so much about myself, but I want to help the people who are listening to get more connected, more aligned with their higher self, so they will know what it feels like to force versus let it flow.
Yeah. So a lot of people feel like they have to hear their higher self, but the higher self will communicate in a variety of different ways, including lining up with songs, or you wake up in the morning with song lyrics in your head, or you feel something, you feel drawn or pulled, like there's a magnetic pull to something. That's your self guiding you into that. But as a way to really access that, going within and listening. So when people want to hear their higher selves, a lot of times they're asking questions, but then they're speculating the answer, which keeps them in an action. So your higher self, you receive the information. So if you're taking action, you're actually projecting, not receiving. So that's a really big thing that a lot of people don't take the time to let go and kind of drift and wait for an answer from their higher selves.
Right. Therein lies the impatience.
It's interesting because when you talk about signs, we always see signs, and we text each other. But I remember like 20 years ago, I was getting into more of spiritual teachings, and I had someone at a bar tell me, we just got into a conversation, and they said, oh, you should read the Celestine Prophecy. And I was like, oh, okay, you know. And then I ended up in a supermarket in a conversation, and someone said the same thing. And I still was kind of like, okay, that's weird. Someone else told me the same thing. And so then I'm in the car on the phone. And we already had cell phones. I remember I had just started having a cell phone then. And I'm in the car. We were allowed to be on the phone in the car back then. and I'm talking to my friend. And I go, oh, you know, this weird thing happened to me lately, and these two people told me to read the Celestine prophecy. And she goes, and I'm like, what? And she goes, I have it in my hand right now. And I was like,
oh my gosh.
I was like, oh my God. So I went and bought it immediately. And that was one of the first spiritual books I read and studied. So anyway, it just reminded me of that.
Yeah, that book was actually a starting point for a lot of people.
And I've never read it. Maybe I need to.
Now I should go back and see how I see it now.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, I started this question in the episode prior to this, not realizing in my notes that it was for this session, this episode. So I'm going to ask you again, can you imprinting the timelines, and which is what we talked about on the phone the other day, and you mentioned masculine, feminine energies, electromagnetic energies. Yeah, tell us more about that.
I'd love to. So we all have masculine and feminine energies, and they're meant to be in a state of balance. So they work in harmony with each other. When we're dealing with polarity, it's really important to balance polarity. Everything in this reality is polarized, but it can be that imbalanced polarity, or it can be that harmonized polarity. So we want the harmonized polarity. So the masculine side is the electric energy. It's the energy that moves out into the world. And the feminine is the magnetic that draws that energy that the masculine puts out, brings it back. So when we're manifesting, it's important to start with the feminine. The feminine side receives the information. So we don't take action before we receive that. So the feminine part of yourself, the magnetic part, receives the information, hands it over to the masculine, who takes action in energy first. And this is where a lot of people get confused, because when you take action in the physical, it's actually a very slow way to manifest. The fastest way to manifest is in the energetics. So the masculine energy can manifest with imagination, and using that imagination to create a vibrational imprint that gets imprinted into the timeline. So when that goes out and it goes into the fabric of reality, which is the timelines are made of, right? So it goes into that, and then the feminine, once it's imprinted into the timeline, the masculine's work is done, and the magnetic part pulls that energy back in, and it's already tuned to it because it started there. Hand it off, goes out, comes back, because it matches all of it. So when we do this with intention, recognize the steps to take, you start manifesting almost instantly when you do this.
Wow.
Whoa. I know. I'm like, this is like a science lesson.
Right, but I feel like it also matches. Remember the cards last night that we were drawn to, and one was feminine and one was masculine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it makes sense.
I am taking that in.
In balance, you end up having people. So when we talk about like the law of attraction, when we talk about manifestation, a lot of people say it doesn't work for me, and that's because they're not doing one of those steps. And it's usually that they're not waiting for the manifestation to arrive. They go out looking for it, which is actually staying in the masculine. So when people don't leave that masculine energy, their manifestations never come back, because they're continuously moving out.
Wow.
Okay. So that's like when people in their lives have situations that don't ever work out. So they'll try one thing, it doesn't work, and then they try something else. They keep trying and trying and trying, but nothing pans out. and then they'll kind of come back and say, poor me, my life sucks.
And the law of attraction doesn't work for me,
Yeah, yeah.
And really, there's just a misconception about how it works. So a lot of people, I'll use a car analogy, will put it in drive and go forward, and then put it in reverse and go backward, and then put it back in forward. And so they'll just go back and forth because they will focus on having it. What would it be like to have it? And get into that. I want it. I would love to have it. That'd be great. But then they practice being who they already are, which is not the person with that. So they'll minimum amount of time in the energies of having it and a maximum amount of time in the energies of not having it. So they actually just keep creating more not having it because that's where their attention is primarily.
So you have to energetically become like you've already have it.
And
it's interesting because Napoleon Hill would talk about that, way back in the day. Like Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, he has a lot. I think oh my God, I have it like right here. And it's, of course I have it right here, right, you guys? The Secret Law of Attraction as explained by Napoleon Hill. And it was written, I think, like in the 30s. And they were already finding out stuff like this back then. And another one is Catherine Ponder talks. Do you know who that is? Yeah, she talks about. She was back in the day as well. Catherine Ponder, Florence Scovel Shinn. They talk about law of attraction, those principles way back. 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and that was really out there then. And it's out there for some now even. So if you could put it into a simple formula that we could memorize, what would that be?
So that would be, get clear about what it is that you would like first. When you're manifesting, you want to know what it is, not how you're going to do it, but what. So figure out the what, and then start asking the open-ended questions to start receiving the guidance. So an example would be a house. So what do I want? An off-grid house with, gardens and whatever, right? And then from there, spending as much time as possible daydreaming that up. What would it be like? What would it feel like? The visualizations are much less important than the feelings. It's the feelings that imprint the fabric of reality. So get into that vibrational alignment over and over and over until it's just who you are now. So you let go of who you were of not having it by practicing having it energetically. And a way you can do it is create a symbol that represents that for you. Put that symbol around, because every time you see that symbol, your subconscious mind is going to get back into that vibrational state.
I love it.
Yeah.
And what's the difference, though, between, I think there's such a fine line we have to all learn between...
Mind will trigger each other. So the mind will trigger the body to have different symptoms, right? And so the mind can overpower the body's consciousness if you're aware that it can. So mind over matter, right? So with this new grid, that is part of the new Earth template. We're sovereign beings, cosmic sovereign beings. We have the right to command anything in our body. We were given this body, and anything that comes into it becomes our possession. So when you take something in, you can recode it or deny running those codes, because like GMOs are not made of pure source energy. They are a perversion of it. So therefore, you don't have to run those. You're not even designed to run those anyways. So avoiding them, I would say, is better. But right now, we're in a world where there's stuff in the water, in the air, in the food. It's everywhere. And
right.
It's really taking the consciousness of your body and starting to fine-tune your connection between your mind and your body and instructing it. So our bodies, our energy bodies, can generate light frequencies that allow us to heal, right? And so when we have our mind set to recode our body will start to run whatever we send it. So when people say, something like I am sick or I'm getting sick or something like that, they're actually imprinting that into their body. And they could say something more like, what would it take for my body to just heal immediately, or something like that, right? So in this new grid energy, we're really supported in our sovereignty, in our body sovereignty and spiritual sovereignty.
I love that. And that's such a great reminder, the questions.
For more information on Eden, go to edensustin.com. For more information on Kim, go to kimlifecoach.com. Make sure to follow them on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Talk Purpose and Truth Podcast. If you loved this episode, you'll love every episode. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thank you for listening.